Welcome back to the Tavern, World Builders! Today we are talking about the dark fantasy TV show The Witcher, which is also a video game series that is based on a book series by Polish author. I am going to butcher this name, Andrzej Sapkowski. I'm so sorry. I tried saying that and I practiced it and it still, I'm sure, did not
pretty
come
good
out
to
properly.
me.
I'm so sorry to any of our Polish listeners. We are specifically going to be talking about the TV show, so do be warned that there are spoilers for that. We may also touch on the video games and the books, so also be warned for that. However, this is focusing on the TV show. With that, I invite you to grab an ale, 0 proof always available, and pull up a chair. I'm Emma, your friendly barkeep, along with Allison.
Hello.
And Christiana.
Hi.
And we are so happy to have you here. Cheers!
Cheers!
So the story for the TV show, and specifically again we'll be focusing on the first season, although we may talk about the other seasons. The story begins with Geralt of Rivia, who is the titular Witcher, the Crown Princess Cyrilla of Sintra, and the quarter-elf sorceress Yennefer of Vingeberg at different points in time, each exploring formative events that shape their characters throughout the first season, before eventually merging into a single timeline. Geralt and Ciri are linked by destiny since before she was born, when he unknowingly demanded her as a reward for his services by invoking the Law of Surprise, which is essentially you lay claim to the next thing that comes to the other person by surprise, and you get it, and surprise, his wife was pregnant. After the two finally meet, Geralt becomes the princess's protector and must help her and fight against her various pursuers to prevent her elder blood and powerful magic from being used for malevolent purposes, and keep Ciri and their world safe. Dun, dun, dun. And with that, let's dive into Happy Hour. So what was everybody's impressions? Had everybody watched this before? I had, so I watched it when it first came out in whenever that was, years ago.
I've seen it before,
yeah.
And I've read a couple of the books and have not played the video games, though.
I haven't read the books, but I have played Witcher 3.
Oh, nice. We've got a nice spread.
Yes, I've read one of the short stories, because it's all, like, short stories that have been, like, combined into novels.
The first book is a short story collection, which is what season 1 is based on.
Yes, yeah. I read part of that, but I didn't get all the way through, and then I have not played any of the games. So who ended up suggesting this one? I think this was Allison's pick as well, was The Witcher?
It might have been, because I really do love The Witcher. I love a Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
Same.
So
That's
this
always a good
just
format.
hit that spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like something Christiana would really like too.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think we both put it
definitely.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a joint nomination for this award, the great award of being on our podcast.
What did you think of it, Emma?
I loved the first season, and I just wasn't that interested after the first season.
I'm not
so I don't know.
surprised if you loved season 1, why you might not be as interested.
Yeah.
Because season 1, it's very different than the other ones. And partly it is that Monster of the Week format that they kind of lose as the stakes get bigger and the story gets a bit bigger.
Yeah. I find that happens with a lot of things where you, like, anything that starts off with kind of like a whatever of the week, then eventually the stakes get big and then they lose it. It's like, but that was the fun thing. Scandal
what
did
I
that, which
liked
is not
about
fantasy
it.
or sci-fi, but I'm forever mad that Scandal lost that.
I've
'cause-
seen like a lot of detective shows, like Lucifer does that as well. I loved
Yes.
the sort of individual murder episodes, and then it kind of went bigger by the end.
Yeah.
And some people really like that, and other people like the smaller stories.
I think Buffy did it well, because they had those bigger stories, but they never really lost the episode of the week thing, like the Monster of the Week thing. So I like, for me, that's a good balance, is like having an overarching thing, but then also having those little self-contained stories is always fun.
I think Firefly does that really well as well. Some people really don't like season 1 because it is very confusing with all the timelines changing constantly.
Yeah, that got me.
So I had an advantage because Jordan, my husband, had watched it first. And so he knew what was going on and when it was going on. So he sort of oriented me whenever a timeline changed. I was like, oh, this is X timeline. And so I wasn't confused at all. And I think that really helped me love this season.
Yeah, I loved it. But I think even a title card that just says the year at the bottom would have solved so many. I remember the first time I watched it, because I had played the video game before I had watched it, so I had the background. But the video game opens with Geralt, like, training Ciri, and then it kind of jumps forward in time, and Ciri's grown up, and they're working together, and Yennefer and everything. It's fairly linear. And so I kept seeing Siri's mom and being like, that's Siri. And then and then it's not Siri. And then I was like, what? No, wait, what?
Yeah.
Phenomenal casting. Is it the same person, I'm assuming? But even young Siri looks so much like older Siri. Anyways, it was just, I'm like, even just like a tiny little...
Yeah, it was especially confusing because so there would be like a flashback to Siri's timeline after seeing Geralt. And then in the next episode, there would be a flashback, but it would be like a flashback from the even before that timeline in the past. It was very confusing when things were taking place. And I really feel like there wasn't a good reason to do it that way.
I'm okay with the way they presented it. It's just, like I said, literally just a title card.
Yeah, could have really...
Yeah, that would have helped.
Would have helped a lot. Especially in fantasy, because Geralt doesn't really age. So he looks basically the exact same in every single one.
Yeah. And you don't have those same, like, cultural touchstones of, like, oh, it's big hair, so it must be the 80s.
Or like old cars and then suddenly new supercars or anything like that. Everything looks the same. So it's hard from, like, the first scene to be like, what is going on here? And then a character comes up and you're like, oh, okay. Now, okay, I get it. This is a flashback or this is the future or whatever.
For some reason, I never found that confusing. I remember when the first season came out, and I remember going online, like, a lot of people were, like, very confused by it. And then I was confused because I hadn't been confused, and I was like, did I miss something that I'm supposed to be confused?
Smarter than the rest of us.
I don't know if it was just that, like, I wasn't looking at my phone, and I was actually, like, because usually I do get confused by stuff like that, because I'm awful for, like, multitasking while watching TV, so I don't know if I just was, like, not multitasking, that's why this one I could follow, but I have no idea why it was a fluke that will never be repeated. But I definitely agree that, like, there's not a good reason to not have just a subtle title card. Like, it's not going to break your immersion anything. So
it doesn't have to be.
It can help.
Even if it was, like, pre-Siri and post-Siri or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
Something like that.
PC and...
The series also wasn't very good at explaining things. Like, often we harp on over-explaining and too much world building, but I almost feel like this didn't give you enough. Like, they expected you to know stuff about The Witcher coming in.
They really relied on people having either played the video games or read the books.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. It wasn't like a huge pet peeve of mine.
I didn't hate it either. It was just a note that maybe added to an already confusing thing with the timelines.
Like with some of these things being like, okay, what the hell is a Witcher? What makes him special?
I don't even know if they explain what a Witcher is in the first season ever, or
not explicitly, but I mean,
no.
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's hard to draw the line because, like, it's also like I get so frustrated when it's like like the over explanation or like not trusting your audience or whatever. Like, there's even a sentence in, like, the first episode where right after he kills the really cute deer and then he goes to the tavern and somebody offers him dinner and he's like, I'm full, and they're like, okay, and he's like, venison. I'm like, you didn't have to say venison. We already understood that he ate the deer. You didn't have to say that it was deer.
Sorry, Henry Cavill, we picked up on that.
I definitely prefer what The Witcher does to the alternative to, like, too much. I think if you're going to err on one side or the other, they made the right choice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Agreed. It's fun. It's a weirdly fun watch for the genre, which we're about to talk about.
Because it's very dark and gruesome, and yet I enjoy it so much.
I think Jaskier does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes, he does.
He does a whole lot of heavy lifting. And also,
just Geralt has a level of charisma the actor
Henry
who
Cavill.
plays him. Henry Cavill has a level of charisma that adds to Geralt that it's hard to look away. Like, I read the short stories and I think a book, and I find he's way more of an asshole in the books. Like, he's not really a good person.
Yeah.
But in the show, he's a handsome asshole. You can sense from the very, very first episode, somewhere deep down in that heart of stone, there's a little core of gold.
Yeah, it's like a softy inside with a hard exterior is how Henry Cavill plays him. And that's really endearing.
Yeah.
It is,
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into that. We've already mentioned the genre, so let's get right into it. I think it's time for Tavern Talk. we're talking about this, like we've said, through the lens of dark fantasy genre, which I think this very thoroughly fits. We've had a few that we've talked about in previous episodes that are like kind of fit, kind of don't fit. I think this is very thorough. Like dark fantasy, I think is very applicable.
I initially had written down like action adventure fantasy, and then I rewatched the show and I was like, this is bordering horror, dark fantasy. This is definitely dark fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah, so Allison, would you like to talk about some of the tropes of dark fantasy, and then we can pick apart how The Witcher does or does not work with those hallmarks?
I think The Witcher it's going to fit a lot of these. So in dark fantasy, you often have common fantasy elements that are deconstructed. So this means that tropes are used straight, but almost even straighter than usual, and they're examined in great detail to show what real-life consequences of this trope would be, and like what are the deepest, darkest realms we can go with this trope. So for example, Renfrey, who's the female character in episode 1, is a twisted version of Snow White. So she's sent into the forest to be killed by woodsmen, but she's robbed and raped, which is like the non-romantic version of how that story might have gone. And the whole storyline with Renfrey is a deconstruction of the save the princess trope, because is she a monster? Is she not? It's not really clear.
And she's a princess, but not really a princess anymore.
Yeah.
And she could be good, but she chooses to go for revenge and try to kill someone and force Geralt to try and kill him for her, she's not a good person. Like, she threatens to kill a little girl, which is what gets Geralt to come to her in the first place. And and then you have a lot of references in the show to fairy tales, like even more than this, but just dark, twisted versions. So, like, there's, like, Hans the Hedgehog and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. Those were 3 I noticed.
Yeah.
I think there's more.
Yeah.
This isn't the Disney version of
this is like this is like the Grimm brothers version.
Even worse at times.
Yeah. And I think, Allison, what you said, like, the important part is almost with dark fantasy, one of the elements isn't just like deconstructing the trope, but it's like, how can I apply this in the worst way?
Yeah.
In a sense, kind of thing.
It's using the trope as it is, but going even
saying
where it will take you.
If I were a really bad person,
what would happen?
What would I do with this? Yeah.
And it's quite easy to do that, because like fairy tales are very ripe for kind of horrifying things, like being trapped in a tower, or
even Sleeping Beauty. The Disney version of Sleeping Beauty is horrifying. She's asleep. She can't consent. You weirdo.
It's awful. So that kind of ties into another trope of dark fantasy, where in lots of fantasy, magic is often this wondrous and beautiful and exciting thing. Dark fantasy will often show just how evil a sorcerer can be, or what terrible things they can do. So like Yennefer taking over people's minds so that they participate in an orgy is horrifying when you think about it. Like all those non-consensual things that she's making them do. Or the costs of magic, like that awful scene where Yennefer becomes beautiful and is literally... it's not clear exactly what happens, but she's like physically...
certainly mutilated in some way.
And made not able to have children, so I assume her uterus is taken out or something. Yeah, that was hard to watch.
Very hard.
Actually, on this watch through, I don't think I even watched it. I was like, well, I can't take that today. And then in a similar vein, you have sort of like the magical creatures in fantasy, like griffins and fairies and unicorns. And in dark fantasy, those are often monstrous things.
And in The Witcher, they definitely are. It's all monsters. They're all just
all
like
so many monsters,
horrifying spider things. And
that opening, the very opening scene to season 1,
is brutal.
It's so good.
Half man, half spider that like launches itself out of a swamp, and it's just horrifying. Yeah,
I'm too scared of spiders for that.
The deer, oh my
The attacks a deer and then Geralt walks towards it. It's like, oh, it's just not your day, is it? And then you hear the like sword.
The sword
swish.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is one of the other tropes, yeah.
Yeah, the world just doesn't have mercy in it. It's a harsh, harsh world in dark fantasy. And I think it's in episode 1, or is it in a few episodes, you have several animal deaths mentioned, which I thought was particularly terrible.
Yeah.
So you have the deer, and then you have a kid mentioned that she, like, brought her dog to the wizard to sell him, like killed him,
killed her dog, and then brought it to the wizard. Yeah,
and then Stregobor, the wizard, also talks about how Renfri strangled 2 puppies as a child to try and convince Geralt that she's evil. So you just have
take that one with a grain of salt. Who knows if that actually?
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually true, but you have these references to like cute animals dying, which is just a horrifying thing.
Yeah, and then also in the like world without mercy, it's like this society is not only brutal to like cute animals, but also to like any people that are deemed to be like the other. So like it turns the whole like hero thing on its head, because normally you'd think like, oh, a monster like hunter, a monster killer, surely they're like heroes and everybody loves them. But like witchers are kind of reviled, like they're seen as being like mutant freaks, people are calling them, and like people really don't like them. So like them, also like, you know, Yennefer at the beginning of her arc, she has like a bunch of like physical ailments
differences,
and like she has like a bit of a spine, like a hunchback, or like a it's not very clear what, and like her jaw is kind of like looks like it was either broken or misaligned or something. And like people are awful to her, as you would assume they would be in a very brutal society to somebody who does not look the way people think that you should look stereotypically. In the first episode, somebody talks to Geralt about like, why don't you travel the main roads? And he says it's hard to make a living on the main roads. I'm like, oh, there's a theme. You can't, you know, it's hard to exist in society when you're somebody that society looks down on in these like brutal fantasy worlds. Yeah,
I love how they see the monster hunter as a monster. I mean, like, I don't love that, but it's such an interesting
thematically,
theme. I like the theme.
For me, the one I struggle with a little bit, and I think this goes back to previous discussions we've had where it's like, I don't have an issue with them using it in this instance. It's just like the trend as a whole. Yennefer to me is a very complicated character because it's like, oh, you were born with physical differences and your whole goal is to fix them. And then you fix them, and then now you can't have children. And as a woman, oh my God, that must be the worst thing ever.
No, that's her
you
whole
must,
goal.
Now your whole goal is you have to be able to fix it to have children.
She does feel like a woman written by a man, to be.
That's what I'm saying. And again, it's one of those things where I rarely have an issue with it in specific instances. It's just like the trend.
Yeah.
It's in its entirety where it's like, oh, so she's disabled and she fixes it. But now as a woman, she can't have kids, and now her goal is to fix it. I'm like, give her a break.
Well, let's talk about let's talk about the specifics. So do we see things that are problematic in this specific instance, or do we think it was well done in this specific instance? Acknowledging that as a whole trend, it is problematic, but like, I
think it was pretty well done in this specific instance because Yennefer still has a pretty meaningful and important relationship before she's fixed in quotes and before she's beautiful in quotes. She has, I'm blanking on his name. Istrid, yeah. So she has like a flourishing life.
Although it's interesting because they're both manipulating each other.
They are, yeah. But if we're looking at it, it's not healthy, but it's like she has a relationship. She's, and I don't think the manipulation is surrounding their looks or their capabilities necessarily.
I think they both actually like each other.
Yeah,
but
that's
they're
what I'm
also
saying.
manipulative.
Yeah. So it's like that's toxic relationships aside because of outside influences. They both actually like each other and find each other attractive. And he doesn't need her to fix herself to find her attractive and to have this relationship with her. So I think that's like strong story building. I do think it's also pretty decent with the whole I want to have a child. There's one episode where Geralt says, do you really think you want to be a mother? Like, you'd be a terrible mother. You're on the run. You're fighting monsters. Like, when will you have time to feed a baby? Which is a fair point. But her argument is they took the choice away from me.
Yeah.
That's why she wants to find a cure to her infertility. It's not that she feels less of a woman or less of a person because of it. She's like, no, they took the choice away and I want that choice back.
Yeah. I could totally see her. If she was fertile, I don't think she would have kids. Like, it's not like she's like, and like, even if she got her fertility back, I don't know if she would still she just wants that, like, you know, autonomy back.
Exactly.
Which,
It feels more to me like she wants power and autonomy rather
her character is
than
definitely
a
motivated
child.
by power.
Yeah.
It's a little bit less problematic, or, you know, I think in this case, because I agree that I think this one is probably a well done version, because also I think it doesn't just make it like black and white, and it's also not like, oh, you know, she's fixed, she's conventionally beautiful, now her life is perfect and all her problems are solved, and clearly it was her disability that was like holding her back. It's like, oh no, the world is still awful. And, you know, also it's acknowledged. I think the text also does a really good job. By like text, I mean like the media does a good job of like looking at how conventional beauty is power and is currency. Like, she uses, in this society of mages, she now uses the fact that she's conventionally beautiful to get close to powerful people, because that is what they appreciate in women, right? So it's not just like, oh, beauty is and of itself a goal you need. It's like, oh, this is also, how messed up is it that this is what gives you power? And like, the problem is not that you had these differences. The problem is that society treated you poorly because of these differences. But
exactly.
Now you're leaning into it because you want that power. So I think it's an interesting and like complex look at it, as opposed to like, so often things get like flattened and it's just like, oh, you know, black and white, or like it's very simple, or
which,
you know,
actually also ties into turning fantasy tropes on its head, right? You look at Beauty and the Beast. He turns into a man and now he's beautiful and it's happily ever after.
Yeah.
She gets her beauty and it is far from happily ever after. In fact, it's probably a little bit worse than it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that whole thing again of like talking about like what the character wants versus what they need. She wants to be beautiful and powerful, but then at what cost? She didn't think about what it would cost her, what they would take from her. And now it's like, oh no, now I need this other
thing. And what
thing
she
that they've taken
needs is autonomy.
Yeah.
It's not what she needs as a baby.
No.
What she needs is the power to choose for
control
herself.
over her own life. And
there are really complex characters in this show. One of my other favorites is Queen Calanthe. I love her so much.
The grandmother?
The grandmother of Ciri,
Yeah, the queen, the original queen.
She's just like this warrior woman who also has to lead a country. There's a point where Ciri learns that she like slaughtered a bunch of elves, and she's like, what? My grandmother wouldn't do that. And you who have watched her in battles are like,
you're like, oh yeah, she did.
Yeah, she probably would have.
Yeah. Which is very much a dark fantasy trope of nothing is black and white. It's like there's no good people or like purely bad people.
Yes.
It's like there's a lot of people who just do a bunch of stuff, and some of it is good and some of it is really bad. And like
like in the very first episode, it's all about Geralt wanting things to be black and white, because people keep telling him, oh, this is the lesser evil, and he's like, evil is evil. I don't want to do with this.
Yeah,
I'm just going to do nothing. And then by the end of the episode, he's forced to choose, and it doesn't go well. And he's like, okay, like where that thought process takes him across the rest of the series is quite interesting, because he sort of has to confront that, like, no choice is a choice. And there often isn't a right answer, and things are all gray and not black and white, and that's a big thing in dark fantasy, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, like, we talked about it in our last podcast episode of the, like, what does it mean to be human, and they kind of explore that also in this, but it's like monsters, especially in the first, like, episode, like, Geralt is trying to figure out if witchers are monsters, is Renfri a monster, is, like, who are the monsters, and that becomes a big theme kind of going across the whole thing, is like...
one of the things that intrigues me so much is when people constantly say to him, oh, witchers don't have any emotion. Oh, you can't feel anything.
Yeah.
Which obviously isn't true, because you can see Geralt feeling stuff, but he doesn't say anything against that, because it's probably a helpful rumor to have witchers sort of seen as these sort of beyond human type people, because he wants to get hired, and you know, he is good at his job, and he also probably doesn't really want to talk about emotions and things, so is okay with that being a rumor. But I just love that that's never really addressed in the show at all. It just is a thing that people say to him, and he doesn't say anything back.
Yeah. Well, it's not addressed explicitly. You clearly see him have emotions.
You see
like
him,
we as the watchers are like, this man has many emotions.
Yes.
But and he's never like, no, I do have him. Having just, if you listen to our last episode about Murderbot, I really want to see now Geralt and Murderbot like hang out, because they both would just like sit and stare and not talk about their feelings and like have a great time.
Yeah. In the books, Geralt is actually a lot more talkative. I really like what Henry Cavill did with the character. Often he just like grunts and things. Like just a very, very expressive actor, able to sort of show things by his movements without having to say them.
Geralt, I think, falls into a typical fantasy trope character, not necessarily just dark fantasy, but all fantasy of like tough, gruff warrior kind of thing. And
paired with a child.
Paired with a child who he reluctantly cares for. You see it in other things too. Like in
Pedro Pascal, is that
I was just going to say, The Last of Us. Is this The Last of Us? You see that a lot. And I never, ever in my life got the attraction to Henry Cavill. Like, he's too handsome. He's handsome to the point where I think he's boring to look at. I'm like, yeah, okay, buff Superman, great. But that one, I think it's in season 2 or something, where someone tries to take Ciri from him, and he just walks up to them super calmly and gets real close to their face and kind of growls like, mine. And I was like, oh. Okay. I get it, Henry Cavill. I see it a little bit. Geralt's kind of handsome now, suddenly.
I'd actually never seen him in anything else.
I saw him in The Tudors at first, and I think he's attractive. I feel like if he's in a historically, like, a period costume, he's attractive, and then if he's at, like, a movie premiere, it's like that thing of, like, oh yeah, you are, like, too weirdly handsome.
Like, weirdly handsome.
It's, like, boring. It's, like, boring handsome. But then if you put him in, like, a wig and a bunch of, like, fake blood, I'm like, okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Oh,
he was born into the wrong time period.
He was, yeah.
He was... This is such an aside. He was in Winnipeg, and he was at the pub down the street from my apartment one time.
What?
And I came in the next day, and everyone was like, Henry Cavill was at the pub. And I was like, okay. Like, didn't care at all. And then I watched The Witcher, and I was like, damn, it would have been cool if I went to the pub.
Yeah.
A day earlier.
I think he's fantastic, and it's hard for me to separate him from The Witcher. So it'll be interesting that now
to see the recasting.
He's no longer in that role for the next season.
Also, props to him for saying, I don't like the direction this is going, because he's a big fan.
He's a huge fan. He's wanted to play The Witcher for, like, years and, like, lobbied for it. And so, like, the fact that he's leaving, I'm like, oh, that's a big
deal.
It's not a great sign.
Did he leave because it was a difference in
artistic differences?
Oh.
Yeah, which makes me so not confident.
And if
I ever watch the rest of it, but yeah. I rewatched, like, just the first episode today, just to, like, again, get it. And I was noting, again, how many people just, like, die so unceremoniously, like, arrow through the throat. There's no, like, in fantasy, so often, you know, you do, like, the Lord of the Rings death, where you, like, they get their final last words, and they get to, like, say their piece, and they, like, die in this, like, noble way, which I also love. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yes. Oh,
this
yeah,
does
we love
not
an
have
epic
that.
death.
Yeah. This is, like, you're looking the other direction and an arrow's through your head, and that's it, and you're gone. Like, specifically, like, the king, like, when the Ciri's grandmother's husband dies, it's just, like, arrow through the throat on the battlefield, nothing. Like, you don't get to say goodbye, you don't get anything. And there's so many deaths that are like that, and that's, I think, a real hallmark of dark fantasy, is taking, like, the romance out of violence. It's just... It's not heroic violence, it's not noble violence, it's just violence, and people die, and it sucks.
The horrificness of the Nilfgaard army also really gets, like, it's very clear that they're going to rape and kill everyone, and torture, because there's a noble family that you see them giving poison to their son, because they're like, we have to die, this is a mercy, we have to die this way, rather than being taken by the soldier. That is just, that was
I think that adds into the horror elements of the show. Like, not just as the resident horror fan, there are some very traditional horror elements, like the episode with the Striga. Scary. Like, pure scary. Like, you know, it being on the ceiling when he thinks it's gone, and he slowly pans up. Like, there's some, like,
that's the worst shot. Oh my goodness, I hate those.
Yeah,
like, oh no, it's above you.
some very traditional horror elements, but I
Yeah.
think my favorite kind of horror is that, I don't want to say emotional kind of horror, but the kind of horror that you're not necessarily expecting, where you're just like, oh my God, they die. They actually just died. Like, that's also sometimes an element in a really good horror story, is that you are kind of always, Indiana Jones always gets away from the boulder before it crushes him. In a horror movie, Indiana Jones would not get away from the boulder before it crushes him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it adds to that element of dark fantasy as well.
Yeah.
What do you think separates dark fantasy from horror? Because
I
they
was
are
just
not the
thinking
same
about that.
thing. But dark fantasy definitely has horror elements.
Have big feelings. Shocker.
Tune in for our 2-hour podcast.
Yeah. I could start a whole podcast just on horror. Horror is definitely very reliant on tropes, for one. And so, like, the final girl trope and things like that, like the haunted house. There's, like, very specific types of horror movies that folks are looking for. When it comes to visual mediums, it also has a lot to do with the cinematography and the scoring as well. But with books, horror has to do with, like, a sense of dread. And I do think dark fantasy can have that sense of dread, for sure. But that's not the focus of the story. The focus of the story for dark fantasy is the world. Whereas for horror, the world building can be really complex and really interesting, but the sense of dread is the focus.
Horror's purpose is really to scare, and that's
unsettle.
not dark fantasy's purpose.
Yeah, dark fantasy can have, like, horrific scenes, or you can have, like, aesthetically horror things, like the monster and the blood. But yeah, I think you nailed it with, like, the horror, because, like, even in a dark fantasy, you might get, like, scared or freaked out by a scene, but then it goes away. Whereas in horror, it just keeps ramping up, right? Like, it's like,
the
like
point
going
of
up a roller
horror is to,
coaster.
like, build and build and build and build and build and build until you hit that release, and then build and build and build and build and build again, kind of thing. So yeah, I think dark fantasy, I would love to read a dark fantasy horror. I think maybe Bram Stoker's
Bram
Stoker.
Bram Stoker. Holy moly. I'm like, where's the R go?
Just throw one in. It'll
somewhere. Like Dracula, I think could kind of be like a dark fantasy horror. I think you could combine the two. But this definitely, to me, doesn't read pure horror. There are definitely horror elements, but the point of the story isn't to invoke an unsettling feeling.
And we are going to talk about horror later on in the show.
Some horror. Later on, in the season, we've got some horror stuff coming up. With that, I think we are at Proprietor's Pick. Allison, what do you have for us? And is it just the Witcher books, or did you find something else?
It is not just the Witcher books.
If you like The Witcher, try
those
The
are
Witcher.
actually quite old at this point. Like, weren't they? I don't want to say a year now. I wanted to say 80s, but now I'm not sure.
I think they're 80s. I also think a lot of people have said that they like the show better, that, like, the books are a little bit tough to
I like
read
the show
sometimes.
better. I didn't keep reading the books because it's funny because we just talked about Murderbot last season, which has a very sparse storytelling, and I found that was the same about The Witcher, but I didn't like it in The Witcher, so I don't know why. But the book that I chose is actually marketed as The Witcher meets Naomi Novik, so I thought that was appropriate. If you don't know who Naomi Novik is, she's a fantasy author. I've never read her, but I think, like, kind of fairy tale-ish, so that seems pretty fitting. It's called Foul Days by Genevieve de Mova. And here's the synopsis. As a witch in the walled city of Kimograd, Kosara has plenty of practice taming Rusalkas, fighting Kikimoras, and brewing lycanthropy repellent. There's only one monster Kosara can't defeat, her ex, the Zmee, known as the Tsar of Monsters. She's defied him one time too many times, and now he's hunting her. Betrayed to him by someone close to her, Kosara's only hope is to trade her shadow, the source of her powers, for illegal passage across the wall to Belgrade, where monsters can't follow. Life in Belgrade should be sweet, but Kosara soon develops a fast-acting version of the deadly wasting sickness that stalks shadowless witches, and only reclaiming her magic can cure her. To trace her shadow, she'll have to team up with the suspiciously honorable detective investigating the death of the smuggler who brought her across the wall.
Ooh.
There's a lot going on in that description. I really love shadow magic, so I'm excited to read this. I actually have this from the library out right now. I haven't read it yet, but I will be reading it. And then the talk about like monsters and even kikimoras makes me
it's
feel
also
kind of
the
Witcher vibes.
naming is very Slavic, similar to The Witcher. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to read this. It's been on my to read wish list for a while now, actually. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
And listeners, if you want to read it, you should definitely check out our bookshop.org page where you can buy it from an indie bookshop and support the podcast.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, the link is down below if you're going to pick up this book. This brings us to Last Call. Here we will have some concluding thoughts and questions that you can take from The Witcher and apply to your own world building. Allison, you want to kick us off?
If you write dark fantasy, consider this idea of deconstructing tropes. Look at things that are common in fantasy and imagine the worst possible outcome and see what you come up with. So, for example, we touched on this earlier, that a princess waiting in a tower for true love could be very romantic, but it could also be pretty horrifying. I actually just started watching Dimension 20's Never After, which is a D&D show.
Very nice.
On
fairy tale season.
What's the app that's on?
Dropout.
Yeah, Dropout TV. And that Never After is horror twists on fairy tales, and one of the characters playing Sleeping Beauty, and she wakes up with like thorns and vines coming out of her mouth in this kind of horrifying
it's very body
horror. Yeah.
Right.
I think there's just something especially horrifying about taking something that was innocent or beautiful or romantic and twisting it into something else. So that's a trick you can use to great effect if you're writing dark fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christiana, what do you got for us from The Witcher that we can apply to world building?
So my suggestion is that you can make a dark fantasy without exploiting real world horrors. So you can include them. For example, Renfrey being robbed and raped and kind of left for dead. You don't need to write the whole scene about it in explicit detail. You can still include these very, very real horrors in the world without it kind of feeling like you're exploiting the characters or exploiting people who have actually lived through that in real life. And I think The Witcher does a really, really good job of being super grim without feeling gross. And
if they had done like a flashback of the rape of Renfrey or something, that would have been too much for me. I couldn't have watched that.
Yeah, so you can have, and even with the scene with Yennefer during her transformation, it's gross and it's weird, but they could have gone a lot grosser and a lot weirder with it.
They leave a lot to the imagination,
which is almost more scary often. Yeah. And so, like, if you include scenes like that, it has to be so carefully done. And I would say 99% of the time, it doesn't need to be included. But you can do it. You can include those very grim things in a way that's, I don't want to say respectful, but respectful.
Not harmful.
Not harmful. Yeah. I think that's probably the better way to phrase it. In a way that's not harmful, but still kind of, because it would also be silly to pretend that wouldn't happen in a very, very grim world.
Yeah.
But you don't also have to, put it on the big screen and upset a lot of people and harm a lot of people with it. So, and also with that, it's not just peasants suffering this. It's not just kings suffering this. It's peasants and kings. You're not kind of exploiting one particular group of people. That's something I think The Witcher does very well, is that kind of everyone's affected by this dark fantasy world. Yeah. And it's not exploiting one particular group. It's not exploiting one particular character. Everyone is having a bad time. Equally.
Everyone's having a horrible time.
No one's having fun.
So one thing that I think really helps with world building in dark fantasy is, and we touched on this, but just to like sum up at the end, is kind of adding that realism back into fantasy. So as opposed to fantasy often kind of takes the realism out in favor of like the romantic and the epic and the heroic, which is great. And that's a type of fantasy. But if you're doing dark fantasy, you want to add that realism back in. Like, we were talking about it with like the deaths and the violence. It's think about realistically, what would a battlefield be like? What would blood smell like? What would the ground feel like underfoot? What people, whose bowels evacuate when they die. Like, adding those, like, really gritty, realistic things back in, I think is definitely a hallmark of dark fantasy.
Yeah.
So, and that could be a good exercise, too, if you're not sure where to start. Take, like, a passage, take a battle or, like, a description of anything, a description of a city from a fantasy thing, and, like, rewrite it with some of that realism added back in. Like, what does the city smell like? Where's all this trash? Like, you know, like, what is that sort of thing? Because that's definitely, like, a total dark fantasy thing, is that, like, grit and
especially
grime.
I think with magic, because magic is often not deeply described. It's like, oh, I blasted them back into the wall.
Yeah. What does
Did
that
it
feel
shatter
like? Does
their
it hurt
ribs?
your...
Like, does it...
Yeah. Does it burn your skin? Does it smell weird? Does it, like, you know,
Speaking
make your
of
teeth hurt?
Magic, dark fantasy also does not romanticize magic. Like, there's,
No.
it's at best neutral, and at worst, it's evil in itself in dark fantasy stories, which is really fun to play with.
Yeah. Dark fantasy is often, like, very low magic. Like, even thinking of, like, you know, Game of Thrones and stuff like that. It's like there's not a ton of magic. It's not everywhere. There's a high cost that comes to using it.
Yeah, The Witcher, you have, like, Geralt's elixirs, and then you have the sorcerers. There's a bit more magic.
He does
than there
have
is in Game of
magic and
Thrones.
things like that, but it's not the whole
But
purpose.
it's not the focus, for sure.
Yeah.
And when we do see it, it sucks. Like Yennefer using it sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like she
so-
burns herself out using magic, which is another fun thing in dark fantasy. You can really explore the consequences of
Then you get a
using
bonus
magic.
question to think about, is like really think about those like costs of magic. Like magic has to be just as, I think that definitely like magic has to be just as gritty as the rest of the world. So you've got to figure out what it's costing, what it's doing, what's the toll.
Even if that's just built into the society as opposed to that being the magic itself. It could be both.
Are you? Yeah.
But because like the sorcerer play, I forget what it's called, where Yennefer is taught, is really brutal. And they turn people into eels if they don't perform well enough. So, you know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this brings us to closing time. We would love to stay longer, but we have just so many darts to pull out of the walls. It's going to take us all night.
Too many. Fix your aim, folks.
Nobody can hit the dartboard. Thank you so much for joining us here at the tavern. If you just can't bear the thought of having 2 whole weeks between every episode, then you should join us on Patreon, patreon.com/worldbuilderstavern, where you can get access to our world building workshops. These are our monthly bonus episodes of the podcast where we build a specific element of a fantasy world and teach you how to do it too. For November's episode, so for this month, we're building a creation myth, which I believe is up already. So if you're listening to this and that sounds like fun, go listen to that episode.
Yeah.
Become God. Build creation.
It's a myth. It doesn't have to be true, but
yes,
people believe it. So
yeah. Those are super fun to record and really, we think, fun to listen to. We're biased, but you know. For all of those links, as well as a link to help a Palestinian family escape Gaza, you should check our notes down below. You can also find us on our website, worldbuilderstavern.com, and that will bring you to all of our stuff like TikTok, Discord, and our bookshop.org page, where you can buy books we talk about on the podcast, which will support us and an indie bookstore. 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
We hope to serve you here again soon at the tavern, but until then, you gotta scram.
Bye.
Get out of here.